Okay, so you want to own a vertical farm. You see the compelling narrative. Traditional agriculture consumes massive water and land. Vertical farms use 95% less water. They produce crops year-round regardless of weather. They eliminate pesticides. They grow food locally, reducing transportation. The environmental benefits are real. The efficiency gains are extraordinary. A vertical farm producing lettuce and microgreens in the middle of a city generates revenue daily. A 10,000 square foot vertical farm producing 50 tons of lettuce per year at $2 per pound is $100,000 in annual revenue. The margins look enormous. The business model seems inevitable. It sounds like owning the future of agriculture. It sounds like owning a vertical farm in 2018 when technology venture capitalists were pouring billions into the space, when the narrative of disrupting agriculture was compelling, when everyone believed vertical farming was the inevitable future, and when anyone with capital and conviction could build a unicorn. That is exactly the comparison people are making right now. The vertical farming industry has received over $5 billion in venture capital since 2015. Companies like AppHarvest, Aero Farms, Little Leaf Farms, and dozens of others have raised hundreds of millions in funding. The industry projections claim $25 billion in market value by 2030. Governments were subsidizing vertical farm development. Universities were researching optimization. The narrative was powerful. The technology was impressive. The opportunity seemed obvious. But here's what's actually happening on the ground, inside vertical farm operations when the cameras are off and the actual financial statements are open. The reality of owning a vertical farm is completely different from what the venture capital pitch decks suggested. Some vertical farms are genuinely profitable. Many are barely surviving. And over 60% of venture-backed vertical farms that launched between 2015 and 2021 have either shut down or dramatically scaled back operations. The gap between the few that work and the vast majority that don't comes down to a handful of things that almost nobody explains before you invest $3 million to $20 million in controlled environment agriculture. By the end of this, you will know exactly where the money comes from, where it disappears to, what the hidden costs really are, and what separates the vertical farms that survive from the ones that consumed billions in capital before quietly shutting down. People assume that owning a vertical farm means you're selling premium vegetables. You are. But that's not where the profit comes from. If you're selling lettuce at commodity prices, the margins don't justify the capital investment. What a vertical farm actually sells is consistency, sustainability narrative, and local production. The customer is willing to pay a premium for lettuce grown locally without pesticides. But here's the brutal truth. The customer will pay maybe 30% to 50% premium. A head of conventional lettuce sells wholesale for 50 cents to 75 cents. A head of vertically farmed lettuce sells wholesale for 75 cents to $1.25. That's only 25 cents to 50 cents in additional revenue per unit to cover the structural cost disadvantage of vertical farming. But here's where the economics collapse. A conventional outdoor farm produces lettuce for 20 cents to 30 cents per unit, including land, labor, equipment, and capital recovery. A vertical farm produces lettuce for $1.50 to $3 per unit, including the massive structural costs. Even with a 50% price premium, the vertical farm is at a $1.25 to $2.50 cost disadvantage per unit. That's not survivable. You're competing against a system that's been optimized for 10,000 years. Vertical farming is optimized for 10 years. The cost structure is fundamentally broken. This is the core issue that killed most vertical farms. They were never profitable on the crop economics. They were profitable on venture capital. As long as capital was available, they could operate at losses while pursuing growth. The moment capital dried up, they had to face actual unit economics. Most couldn't. They shut down. Everyone talks about the growing technology. Nobody talks about everything else that consumes capital before you produce a single head of lettuce. Real estate and facility. $500,000 to $3 million. A vertical farm needs a building, a warehouse or industrial space. 5,000 to 50,000 square feet depending on scale. Urban real estate is expensive. A 10,000 square foot space in a semi-urban location costs $2 to $4 per square foot per year to lease. That's $20,000 to $40,000 monthly or $240,000 to $480,000 annually just for rent. Alternatively, buying the facility requires $500,000 to $3 million capital depending on market and size. Vertical farming equipment and technology, $1 million to $10 million. This is the largest capital expenditure. Vertical growing systems with LED lighting, climate control, irrigation, and monitoring. A 10,000 square foot facility with modern vertical farming systems costs $1 million to $3 million in equipment. A 50,000 square foot facility costs $5 million to $15 million. Each vertical tier produces crops but requires massive infrastructure. LED lighting alone is $500,000 to $2 million for a proper facility because you're replacing the sun with electricity constantly. Climate control systems, $200,000 to $1 million. You must maintain precise temperature, humidity, and CO2 levels. HVAC systems, dehumidifiers, and environmental controls are expensive. Failure means crop loss. You need redundancy. Multiple systems. Cost, $200,000 to $1 million depending on facility size and sophistication. Automation and software systems, $300,000 to $1 million. Irrigation systems, nutrient delivery, crop monitoring, data analytics. Modern vertical farms are as much software as agriculture. Automation reduces labor but requires significant capital investment. Cost, $300,000 to $1 million for a properly integrated system. Water treatment and recirculation, $150,000 to $500,000. Vertical farms use recirculated water, but you need treatment systems to maintain nutrient balance and prevent disease. Water filtration, testing, and nutrient mixing systems. Cost, $150,000 to $500,000. Permits, construction, and compliance, $100,000 to $500,000. Building permits, agricultural licensing, food safety certifications, environmental compliance. Depending on jurisdiction, regulatory requirements can be substantial. Cost, $100,000 to $500,000. Initial inventory and seeds, $50,000 to $200,000. Seeds, seedlings, growing medium, nutrients. You need inventory to start production immediately upon opening. Working capital and operating buffer, $500,000 to $2 million. Money to cover operating expenses during ramp-up period. Salary for staff. Initial marketing. Contingencies for equipment failure or crop loss. The real total investment. For a legitimate commercial vertical farm, the total capital investment is $3 million to $20 million depending on scale and location. Most vertical farms have been financed through venture capital, not traditional business financing. This has masked the true cost of capital. Once you're producing crops, the costs are relentless. And this is where the vertical farm business reveals why the model is structurally broken. Electricity, 40% to 60% of production costs, typically 50%. This is the largest variable cost, and it's catastrophic. LED lighting runs 24/7. Climate control runs constantly. Pumps and systems operate continuously. A 10,000 square foot facility might consume 1,000 to 1,500 kilowatt hours per day. At 12 cents to 18 cents per kilowatt hour, that's $120 to $270 per day or $3,600 to $8,100 per month in electricity costs. For a facility producing $20,000 to $40,000 monthly in revenue, electricity is 10% to 40% of gross revenue. Add that to other costs, and you're underwater. Labor, 20% to 35% of production costs. Vertical farms require skilled labor. System operators. Crop technicians. Harvest staff. You need specialists to manage the systems, not just generic farm workers. A facility needs 5 to 15 full-time employees depending on scale. At average $50,000 per employee per year, that's $250,000 to $750,000 annually. Divided by revenue, it's 20% to 35% of production costs. Seeds and growing medium, 10% to 15% of production costs. Continuous planting cycle requires constant seeds and growing medium replenishment. Premium seeds for controlled environments cost more than field seeds. Cost, 10% to 15% of production value. Nutrients and fertilizers, 5% to 10% of production costs. Hydroponics requires precise nutrient delivery. You're buying concentrated nutrients and mixing them. Cost, 5% to 10% of production value. Facility maintenance and repairs, 8% to 12% of production costs. Equipment breaks. Systems fail. LED arrays degrade. HVAC systems need servicing. You need spare parts inventory. A single equipment failure can cost $50,000 to $200,000. Reserve budget, 8% to 12% of production costs. Distribution and logistics, 15% to 25% of revenue. This is often overlooked. Vertical farms can't compete on price. They compete on freshness and local delivery. But freshness requires expensive logistics. Cold chain requirements. Frequent deliveries. Direct-to-customer distribution is capital-intensive. Cost, 15% to 25% of revenue. Packaging and marketing, 8% to 15% of revenue. Premium positioning requires premium packaging. Labeling. Branding. Direct-to-consumer marketing if you're going that route. Cost, 8% to 15% of revenue. Insurance and compliance, 3% to 8% of production costs. Crop insurance. Liability insurance. Food safety insurance. Regulatory compliance audits. Cost, 3% to 8% of production costs. The monthly production and cost reality for a typical vertical farm. A 10,000 square foot facility producing 50 tons of lettuce per year, 4.2 tons per month. Monthly production, 4.2 tons or roughly 5,600 heads of lettuce at 1.5 pounds per head. Revenue, 5,600 heads times $1 wholesale equals $5,600 per month. Wait. That can't be right. Let me recalculate. A 10,000 square foot facility should produce more. Actual calculation, modern vertical farms produce 20 to 50 pounds per square foot per year. A 10,000 square foot facility at 30 pounds per square foot produces 300,000 pounds per year or 25 tons. At mixed crops, lettuce, herbs, microgreens, weighted average price is $2 to $4 per pound wholesale. At $3 per pound, 300,000 pounds times $3 equals $900,000 per year or $75,000 per month. Monthly revenue, $75,000. Now the costs. Electricity, 50% of production cost of 60%, $22,500. Labor, 25%, $18,750. Seeds/growing medium, 12%, $9,000. Nutrients, 8%, $6,000. Maintenance and repairs, 10%, $7,500. Distribution and logistics, 18% of revenue, $13,500. Packaging and marketing, 10%, $7,500. Insurance and compliance, 5%, $3,750. Administrative/professional services, $2,000. Contingency, 5%, $3,750. Total operating costs, $94,750. Operating loss before facility costs, $19,750. Monthly loss, $19,750. Annual operating loss, $237,000, plus facility rent/mortgage. Assume $3,000 per MO, $36,000. Total annual loss, $273,000. This vertical farm producing $900,000 in annual revenue is losing $273,000 per year. The model is deeply unprofitable. The math above assumes electricity at 12 cents per kilowatt hour. In many markets, electricity costs are higher. In California, commercial electricity is 16 cents to 22 cents. In Europe, electricity is 30 cents to 50 cents per kilowatt hour. When electricity costs are higher, the math gets worse. At 20 cents per kilowatt hour, electricity costs jump 67%. Your operating loss increases from $273,000 to $450,000 annually. Energy-intensive LED technology. Modern LEDs are more efficient than older technology, but they still consume massive amounts of electricity. A vertical farm is essentially replacing the sun with electricity. The sun provides free photosynthesis energy. Vertical farms must purchase that energy. The energy math is brutal. You can't compete with free sunlight. Summer versus winter production variability. Paradoxically, vertical farms produce more lettuce in winter when demand is lower and prices are depressed. They produce less in summer when outdoor farms are in full production. Your revenue fluctuates seasonally while your fixed costs remain constant. Equipment failure cascade. 1 LED array fails. You lose 5% of production. A climate control failure causes crop loss. $20,000 in immediate product loss plus equipment repair. An irrigation system fails and you're losing $5,000 to $10,000 in daily production. Equipment failures are common. They devastate profitability. Crop disease and loss. In a monoculture vertical farm, disease spreads fast. A pathogen outbreak can destroy an entire facility's production. Crop loss of 20% to 40% is possible. That's $180,000 to $360,000 in lost revenue in a single month. Most vertical farms don't have reserves to survive this. Venture capital investors believe that scaling would reduce per unit costs. Build more facilities. Spread fixed costs. Economies of scale. But the math doesn't work. The cost structure is fixed, not variable. Whether you have 1 facility or 10, electricity costs 12 cents per kilowatt hour. Labor doesn't become cheaper at scale. You still need 5 to 15 employees per facility. The per unit cost advantage of scale is minimal. You're just scaling losses. AppHarvest raised over $250 million in venture capital. They built 9 facilities. They shut down most operations and cut 80% of their workforce in 2024. Arrow Farms raised over $150 million. They filed for bankruptcy in 2023. These weren't small operations. These were well-capitalized companies with experienced management. They failed because the unit economics don't work. You specialize in high-value crops. Microgreens. Specialty lettuces. Edible flowers. Cannabis in legal markets. These crops sell for $15 to $50 per pound, not $2 to $4. A 10,000 square foot facility producing 300,000 pounds at $20 per pound generates $6 million in annual revenue. Operating costs are $1.5 million. Facility costs are $500,000. Net profit, $4 million. Now the model works spectacularly. Alternatively, you locate in a market with exceptionally high electricity costs and extremely constrained fresh produce supply. A vertical farm in the Middle East or isolated geographic area where produce is imported at high cost and electricity is relatively cheap. The facility becomes the cheapest local source of fresh produce. Revenue per pound jumps. Profitability emerges. The bad scenario. The more common outcome: you build a 20,000 square foot vertical farm in a secondary market producing lettuce and herbs. Capital investment, $10 million. You produce $1.8 million in annual revenue. Operating costs are $1.5 million. Facility costs are $800,000. Annual loss, $1.3 million. You're losing money every month. After 2 years of losses, you have $2.6 million in cumulative losses. Investors pull funding. You're forced to shut down. You've destroyed $10 million in capital. Most venture-backed vertical farms launched between 2017 and 2021. The capital was available. The narrative was compelling. By 2023, energy costs were rising, inflation, labor costs were rising, and the market was collapsing. Lettuce prices had fallen 20% to 30% due to oversupply from new facilities. By 2024, most facilities couldn't sustain operations. They shut down. The timeline from launch to shutdown, 5 to 7 years. The cumulative losses, $1 million to $5 million per facility. Across hundreds of facilities, that's billions of dollars destroyed. The hidden cost nobody discusses, opportunity cost of capital. A vertical farm requires $10 million in capital investment. That capital could be invested in a stock index fund generating 10% annually or $1 million per year. Instead, it's generating negative returns in a vertical farm, losing $1 million annually. The opportunity cost is $2 million per year, the $1 million you're losing plus the $1 million you're not making in the alternative investment. Owning a vertical farm is a capital-intensive, energy-intensive agricultural business with structural cost disadvantages relative to outdoor farming. The unit economics don't work except in narrow cases, high-value crops, supply-constrained geographies, or zero-cost energy sources. The money in vertical farming has gone primarily to venture capital investors who've lost billions. Some has gone to equipment manufacturers who've sold billions in systems to desperate farmers. Almost none has gone to the farmers themselves because the operational model is fundamentally unprofitable. The separation between vertical farms that survive and those that fail comes down to three factors. Crop selection focused on high-value products, not commodity crops. Location selection in supply-constrained markets with high import costs, not saturated markets with cheap local production. Energy sourcing focused on low-cost renewable energy sources, not grid electricity at 12 cents to 20 cents per kilowatt-hour. A vertical farm growing microgreens or specialty lettuce in a high-cost import market with access to cheap renewable energy can be profitable. A vertical farm growing commodity lettuce in a market with cheap local outdoor supply and expensive grid electricity will fail. The difference is market selection and crop selection, not operational excellence. Over 60% of venture-backed vertical farms have shut down because venture capital wasn't willing to face the unit economics. They kept funding growth stories. When capital dried up, the growth stories collided with reality. Most couldn't survive actual profitability requirements. If you're considering vertical farming, understand this distinction clearly. You're not disrupting agriculture. You're competing against 10,000 years of outdoor agricultural optimization with 10 years of indoor farming technology. The cost structure is fundamentally broken for commodity crops. You need extraordinary advantages, high-value crops, no-cost energy, or zero-cost capital, to survive. Without those advantages, you're funding a very expensive lesson about the difficulty of disrupting fundamental infrastructure.